Let's take a look at a Cleartext authentication case. Now let me note that you would never use this in an application, and this is simply for education purposes. But if you have not seen this before, it is a useful way to see the exchange of credentials. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. As you can see here, I have two folders. One of them contains the client code, which will run in the browser. The other one has the server code, which will run on top of Node.js. Now, to go ahead and get started here, let's move into the client folder. And as you can see there, I have a login, a protected file, meaning you cannot access this without credentials. And then I have a registration page as well. Now, in addition to those three files, I have two JavaScript libraries, one of them for cookies and the other one to facilitate my postings and exchanges with the server, and that one is called Super Agent. Now, let's go ahead and open up the login code. And as you can see here, the very first two lines are making references to those libraries. The next three, well, the next five here, simply define the input field, so the email and the password, and then a submit button. The button calls, as you can see here, the login function. Here is the call, and here's the function definition. And within it, as you can see here, the very first thing I do is that I enter the URL that I'm going to be posting to. This is going to run locally, and I'll run that server in a minute. I then define a user object that carries within it an email property and a password that we read from the information on the page. I then make the posting using the Super Agent library, and as you can see here, I provided the information that I just defined. The posting endpoint, the user that we just created, and then I handle two cases, an error case and a response case. If we have an error, we go into the first condition. Otherwise, we go into the else, and we write to the console the information that we received from the server, as well as updating the page on the browser. Now, having said that, now we're going to go ahead and run two servers. One of them will be the page that we will see, and that's simply, let me go ahead and move to that. That is a simple HTTP server. You can run any type of server you like. In this case, I'm using one from an NPM module called HTTP server. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning, the server that serves up the endpoint that we're trying to hit runs on Node.js, and that one is simply node index. And we will take a look at the code once we do a cycle on the client. So let's go ahead and go back to the browser, and as you can see here, we're going to navigate the server page that we need. It's at 8080, and then I'm simply going to enter login.html, which is the name of the file. And as you can see here, we have the information we expect, a couple of fields, and then a password. Now, I've predefined a couple of users on my server, so I'm going to go ahead and enter one of them now. That's peter@mit.edu, and his password is Spiderman. And I'm going to go ahead and post that information now by clicking on the login button, and as you can see there, we have an error. Now, I believe it's because that information is cached from a previous example that I was doing. Let me go ahead and reload and take a look at where that information is being posted. And yes, this is the right address, so let me try that again. I will go ahead and enter Peter Spiderman. Let me go ahead and post, and yes, as you can see there, we have a success. The server authenticated, returned with the user ID, and I have this feedback in the browser. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what happened server side, or take a look first at the server side code, and then we will look at the feedback on the console. A few things to note. I'm requiring a couple of modules. The very first one is Express. I then create an instance of Express. I then require on line 12 body parsers, provide some configurations for that module. And I also allow cross-domain postings. This means I will receive or I will accept postings from any client, be it HTTP, be it the server, be it anything else. Now, I also, below it, have a number of routes that I am handling. And as you can see here, the one we just did was the login route. You can see here that as I go into the route, the very first thing that I do is that I write the information that was posted to the console. I then look for the user within the predefined users that I have, and at that point I'll go ahead and show you the users. You can see here that I've created or predefined a couple of users, Peter at mit.edu with the password Spider-Man, and I also have one for Clark with Superman. Now you can see there that if that matches, given the information that I sent, it will create a user object with the properties from those objects that I just showed you. I then, if I have the user, meaning if I was able to find the user, then I compare the passwords. As I mentioned, this is clear text. And also, as I mentioned, do not do this. This is simply to illustrate the information between client and server. Otherwise, I send an authentication 500 message back to the user. And if the user is not found as well, I do the same. Now, I should also note that once I've done that, I also create a couple of cookies. And as you can see here, I create a cookie for each of those informations, each of the properties in that object that I am receiving. Once again, this is simply for illustration purposes. We can go ahead and take a look as well as the information on the server side that was posted, and you can see there that that console right shows you the email and the password that was sent to the server. Now let's go back and take a look at the case where we're going to register a new user, and in this case I'm going to delete all the cookies, as you can see here, and I'm going to change the URL here to register. And I'm going to go ahead and enter a new user. In this case, it will be Bruce at mit.edu, and the password will be Batman. And I'm going to go ahead and post that information. Once I do, you can see there the confirmation back. And if I look at cookies and refresh, in this case, I'm not creating them. I'm simply adding a user. So if we go back to login, I'll go ahead and log in with the new user. It will be Bruce at mit.edu. Password is Batman. I'm going to go ahead and post. And now if we take a look at the cookies, you can see there that we have cookies. Now let me go ahead and show you one more path on the server. And this path is a protected path, as you can see here. I will simply read the cookies from the machine. I will post them to the server. The checks that we did on login will be performed. And if all is well, the authentication will be confirmed. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the client. And I'm going to navigate to the protected page. And as you can see there, I'm simply hitting the server with the information that I have on the page. I will go ahead and show you the protected code. As you can see there, I simply have, this is the protected.html file. I simply have a button. I then define a user object, and I read all of that information from the cookies using the library that I mentioned before. I then do the same thing that I've done in the past, package that up into a super agent post, and I make the posting to the server. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the browser, and now I'm going to open up the console, and I'm going to test the protected password route. And as you can see there, we get the information we expect. Bruce has been confirmed. The information that we sent back was matched up with that was in the server, and we have confirmed the credentials within this protected route. So this is a clear text example. It's called clear text because it is going on the network in the clear. The comparisons that are being done on the server are in the clear, and this is simply for illustration purposes.